Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of the Mental Health Podcast. I have Chava here with me.
I should tell you how to pronounce my name.
Yes.
Might want to start over again.
y- okay, yeah, go ahead.
My
Yeah,
name it's pronounced Chava. So the C is
Chava.
silent. Yes,
Okay.
and then my last name is like it's Vietze. So as if you were saying pizza, but
Pizza.
replace the P with a V. Vietze. Yeah, Chava Vietze.
Good to know. Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
I think Chava pizza. I'm not sure if I, screwed it up too badly, but I'll let her introduce herself, and then we can take it from there. So, hi, Chava. How are things with you?
Hi, good. Thank you. Yes, you got it. Yeah. Hava Vietze. We can always talk about what that means and where that comes from, we may. But thank you for having me today. Yeah, happy to be here. And it's also the first day of summer, so I'm very happy about that.
All right. Yeah. Always excited about summer and the sun coming out.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I ask people is like to give themselves an elevator pitch of sort, so people know who you are, what your perspective is, and like how you sort of show up as well. So you can get us started with a short pitch about yourself.
Okay, sure. Let's see, what do I have? Okay, so well, in terms of my work, the past 10 years or so, I've worked primarily with early to mid-stage startups, among tons of different clients across many different industries. I've advised, coached, and consulted with leaders and organizations on implementing programs, programmatic change. So that might include process changes or implementations,
Hmm.
introducing new technologies and platforms. A lot of my work has been at the intersection of employee experience, customer experience. I'm really an experience person. So I look at
Hmm.
like service design, I look at the entire people experience. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And a lot of that I think extends to just kind of who I am as a person. I'm a massive advocate of people first work and
Hmm.
leadership. So building things for people, and
Hmm.
they are all built by people. So
Hmm.
really actually embracing that.
Hmm.
And in my latest venture project, I launched my own podcast as well,
Hmm. Hmm.
called Stop Blaming Avocados. And it provides space, and it really is providing people with a space. And the purpose is to uplift voices who are really breaking from, I'm using air quotes, from
Hmm.
tradition,
Hmm.
and forging new paths for communities and organizations that, like I said, are rooted in people and for people.
Interesting. Um, let's just get started with the basic question, right?
Hmm.
What does mental health mean to you?
Hmm.
Um, so.
Yeah, for sure. So I come from my background in terms of my family
Hmm.
has always been very rooted in mental health, and I mean like careers. So
Hmm.
my mom, my dad, both mental health professionals of sorts. My uncle, my aunt, my cousins, like I have several people within my family
Hmm.
who all devoted their life to mental health in varying degrees, whether
Hmm.
that was social work, whether that was psychology, therapy, etc. Art
Hmm.
therapy, for
Hmm.
example, that that's one of them. Um, and so it's always been rooted, I think, in everything that I've done.
Hmm.
Of course, that still means I've had my own mental health journey.
Hmm.
But the way that I look at mental health is it does start with the mind, of
Hmm.
course, right? But
Hmm.
it goes beyond that. So
Hmm.
mental health to me, it's an integral part of our overall well-being.
Hmm.
Um, and it contributes and is a part of this like kind of entire universe you have, your emotional, your spiritual, your social, your physical
Mhm.
well-being.
Mhm.
The way that we approach life, it all contributes to our mental health.
Mhm.
And then of course additionally, because this is really important part, is
Mhm.
society, work, relationships, all those external factors too,
Mhm.
beyond our internal, our kind of that internal universe we have, right? All of those external factors too, they're all contributing factors that,
Mhm.
that positively impact, that negatively impact our
Mhm.
mental health. And
Mhm.
then, taking it a step further, if it's affecting your mental health, it is affecting your overall well-being. So I look at mental health as like this. It's not this one piece. It's not just your mind. It's not just therapy. It's just like it's this entire kind of holistic practice and
Mhm.
how you move throughout life.
Definitely. Yeah, and thank you for highlighting the I guess the polar split between like the internal and the external aspect. And I feel like, from what I've heard from you already, you're focusing more from the external perspective, from a work, aspect, wherein like you're trying to build up people, build up voices which are trying to showcase and highlight uh, startups which are breaking the norms. One thing that I see from a work perspective is that, in 2023, there have been a lot of layoffs, and, there have been a lot of people impacted in terms of what they can do for their work standpoint as well. So, can you talk a little bit about, you know, your take on this, and like how, people can sort of look at this better as well? So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, so that's the thing when I talk about mental health and I talk about like the internal part. Now, of course, we're all responsible for and ourselves. Like no one else can make the decision to that we want to be healthy, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or eat better, which, nutrition, for example,
Mm-hmm.
contributes heavily actually to our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so getting proper nutrition is incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But there are things that we look at of like access to healthy options, like
Mm-hmm.
access to fresh organic food,
Mm-hmm.
and how that actually impacts us at a society, as like societal level. And so
Mm-hmm.
what are the inequalities there? So when I am looking at like, yeah, like focusing in on those external factors, because the
Mm-hmm.
external factors do have a lot to do with how we can take care of ourselves internally if we have access, if there is equal access
Mm-hmm.
to services of sorts. So when I think about the market now and I'm thinking about the layoffs, right? So we're in I I honestly can't completely describe it. I am not an economist. Like I, of course I do the
Mm-hmm.
best I can.
Mm-hmm.
Um and but we're in a weird market. So there's lots of layoffs going on in certain industries, and
Mm-hmm.
particularly, tech. I think we're seeing it a little bit in finance, and perhaps there's some other industries that are like buckling down.
Mm-hmm.
Um well, others are doing exceedingly well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very weird. It's a very weird place to be. I'm in the
Mm-hmm.
Bay Area, so of course I am seeing a lot of layoffs, and I am seeing how that does impact people,
Mm-hmm.
um, very personally.
Mm-hmm.
There, I think there's things that we need to think about. One,
Mm-hmm.
how difficult it is for people to actually find jobs, but
Mm-hmm.
also how difficult it is to not only just look for a job, but also to continue to take care of yourself
Mm-hmm.
in the same way when you don't necessarily have the same financial means, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a huge area that I think, needs more light essentially is like the fact of like how much does like healthcare like Cobra cost? So
Mm-hmm.
like if you have just gone through a work trauma, essentially you've been laid off, and that I think is a varying level in terms of that impact for someone individually.
Mm-hmm.
You may need access to mental health services that
Mm-hmm.
may be more difficult for you to get now that you've been laid off,
Mm-hmm.
and that is a reality that we do have to look at.
Mm-hmm.
um Now, I think in addition to that, when you're looking at layoffs and you're looking at what's happening within organizations, there's also like this tug of war going on between many
Mhm.
like particularly large companies and then also their workforces.
Mhm.
And for example, like with remote work and hybrid and
Mhm.
layoffs, and they're saying like you need to come to work, otherwise you're not going to have a job anymore.
Mhm.
Um, because we're going back to what it looked like before COVID or whatever, which is,
Mhm.
in my opinion, quite silly because COVID was this incredibly substantial, life altering, universe altering world event that
Mhm.
happened.
Mhm.
We don't go back in time. We need to figure out continuously together how to move forward and how to continue to make it more equitable,
Mhm.
accessible, etc. Anyway,
Mhm.
so those things are also impacting people's mental health because there are people who are like leaving organizations to start their own ventures that are wanting to better prioritize themselves. I also
Mhm.
think there are people who have been laid off, and I know some of them, right? I myself, uh, who are trying to build new ventures that they're changing industries because they're trying to make work more accessible for them, making it work for their lives, which by the
Mhm.
way is all contributing to contributes to your health, and
Mhm.
doing that is really really hard. So
Mhm.
I hope that answered your question because I think I like jumped around. I was like, well, there's this is what's going in layoffs.
Right.
These are some of the societal things that I don't think that people are necessarily considering. Like, again, it's like access to services when you do not have the financial means. And
Mhm.
that goes beyond that. It's like, what does unemployment look like? What is like healthcare costs, what does food costs, like all of those things that are
Mhm.
very impactful while
Mhm.
also people are trying to find a new job and support families. And
Mhm.
then there's like this whole other side of it is that we're like, again, that tug of war of like what is work, what does work look like, what is
Definitely.
constantly evolving.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like, some of the points that I picked on was like, understanding what mental health access means once somebody gets laid off. That was one main takeaway for me. For two, understanding how people are reducing flexibility. And I also noticed that there is a change in the power dynamic, wherein, like, previously it was like just for a little while, the employees had a power shift, wherein like a lot of employers were paying a lot of money and offering a lot of services to hire and employ them. But I feel like now that power shift has gone away, and all the power has gone back into the hands of the employers. And you're right, from that standpoint, in order to make it more equitable, a lot of people are quitting. In order to improve access, a lot of people are moving on to create their own ventures, and that sort of has significant impact on the individual as well. One thing that I feel like um, I wanted to stress on was like the whole aspect of work and what it means to an individual, and like when you're working, why, and as well, like when you're not working, and how that sort of impacts your whole sense of identity. Can you talk a little bit about like what that has been for you, and like how your own sort of experience has changed with like different work lifestyles that you have encountered as well? So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I also think it's a really tough question to answer. It's also a question that when I think about it for myself, it's like I think my answer is continuously evolving
Hmm.
because because I am continuously evolving, but
Hmm.
and then it's very cultural.
Hmm.
So depending on the country you're in,
Hmm.
um and we'll talk very specifically about the US. I mean, so I grew up in the US. I have a
Hmm.
very multicultural family. I also think
Hmm.
that, a lot of I think that a lot of kind of the upbringing I've had, w- your life was always the most important part of
Hmm.
you. So
Hmm.
the relationships that you have, the life
Hmm.
that you live, the
Hmm.
adventures that you take
Hmm.
has always been most important.
Hmm.
Work is something that helps. support
Mhm.
your life.
Mhm.
Now, right, that's one side of it.
Mhm.
And that is something that, perhaps when you're traveling in certain other countries in the world, like in Europe, like you within the first 20 minutes of a conversation, work probably never comes up.
Mhm.
In the United States, that is like very, very different. And so it's
Mhm.
something that I think that I've always personally actually battled with,
Mhm.
because I didn't really grow up with this idea that work, 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 work is like number one thing. But
Mhm.
within the US, I'm actually curious to ask you, like, how often is it that like one of the first few questions someone's like, so what's your name? Where are you from? What do you do?
Mhm.
And it's
Definitely.
like, and that's common, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so when we're looking at work identities, I think there is some generational shifts that are going on, and I think part of that is because we're also redefining what work looks like too
Mhm.
for people. Like if
Mhm.
you look at Gen Z might have several what maybe we previously called side hustles to
Mhm.
create like this, you know, full time what full-time work might look for like for somebody.
Mhm.
um and people, I think also when I look at people in the, well, particularly again like the younger generations, and they're redefining even what
Mhm.
what does life look like. And so when
Mhm.
I look at work identity, like I said, it's a difficult thing, because I personally have always lived with this, like, work supports me.
Mhm.
Work needs to fit into the life that I want to create for myself.
Mhm.
I am not interested,
Mhm.
and this is a definitely heavily debated topic, or um there's definitely those that agree and disagree, but work is not something that I am adapting to your company. You
Mhm.
want me in an office from 8 to 6, great. You only
Mhm.
want to give me 10 days of vacation a year. Okay, well, it is what it is.
Mhm.
I don't look I don't look at work like that. I think that when people have the ability to properly rest, and people have the ability to live very, like, very full lives
Mhm.
with relationships with, I want to do yoga at noon, and
Mhm.
then I'm going to go knock out this killer presentation at 2 p.m. or something.
Mhm.
And I'm going to go work at this cafe because, you know what? Today I'm not feeling super inspired, but
Mhm.
sometimes when you look at a lack of productivity, you need to shake up your environment. There's this
Mhm.
really cool woman I know.
Mhm.
Her name's AC, and she does her expertise is in like bringing playfulness for adults. And I look
Mhm.
at like, well,
Mhm.
that there's all this proven science and neuroscience and things of like
Mhm.
why it's so important to like have this very full life
Mhm.
and full excite, not, all right, not always exciting, but variation to your day, and how that actually inspires and uh provides more productivity. Like,
Mhm.
that's her work, right? And I'm
Mhm.
like, so when I look at work identities, I'm like, I want to feel more of that. I want to feel more inspired
Mhm.
in my daily life. I want to feel that my work is truly it is truly impactful, but it is not something that's a part that I want to be a part of my identity. Now, am I
Mhm.
there yet?
Mhm.
Personally? No.
Mhm.
Because everyone around, there's so many people around you still
Mhm.
that, and this media and everything, it's still continuously saying
Mhm.
that work is a part, work is your identity. Work
Mhm.
is perhaps a piece of it, but it should not be my whole identity. And so
Mhm.
when I'm looking at people who are shifting careers and shifting industries, letting go
Mhm.
is really, really difficult. And I know I've had that personally for me.
Mhm.
Because you also look at everything that I've built over the past da
Mhm.
da da years.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't want again, yeah, I'm like, I don't want it to look at this is your identity. It's a piece of what you do, and it might
Mhm.
change next year, and it might change in 6 months, and it might change in 5 years when you are
Mhm.
wanting to do something else, continuously evolve.
Right.
But culturally, it's very different, and it really, that is very impactful for us. So there's a
Hmm.
lot we have to unlearn. There's a lot we have to decide what serves us and what doesn't serve us. And,
Hmm.
again, continuously evolving. And like, if you ask me that question next week, like I might give you a different answer.
Definitely. I mean, like I appreciate that as well, right? I mean, like I understand that work and what that means to me um has changed over a period of whatever X years. One thing that I understand as well, that there are limitations to what I can do. I'm
Mhm.
a first generation immigrant. I am on a temporary visa here, and I just wanted to sort of highlight this, as in there are struggles for people from different perspectives. One, can you what is your luxury in terms of exploring certain side hustles? What does the government sort of mandate in terms of like what you can do and what you can't do in terms of your own side hustle? So that was one lens that I definitely wanted to highlight on, since you mentioned the ever changing sort of workspace as well. The other thing that I also wanted to bring and touch upon was like culture, right? And like how that sort of defines your own sense of identity. And like,
Mhm.
and you mentioned, different cultures prioritize different things. Let me just get started with your name itself, right? Like, yeah, the name itself is very confusing. So I don't sort of like understand the impact a name has on an individual, on like the individual's identity, and that sort of tying back to the mental health aspect as well. So can you talk a little bit about your own sort of
Mhm.
name and how that sort of impacts you as an individual? So.
Yeah, and I want to first actually touch on something that you said earlier about which is something that I've had several discussions on with friends, with peers, which I've seen too, which you mentioned about how you approach work, because work, right, is so much about survival. I mean, at the
Hmm.
end of the day, people listen. I may work for fun, or like I may really enjoy the work that I do,
Hmm.
and the people I'm doing the work with. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, I need the work to
Hmm.
survive.
Hmm.
I need the work to meet my basic needs.
Hmm.
And um and so when we're looking at survival and what you mentioned, I think, and this is obviously this is not just the US, this is in several other countries where, yeah, you need a work visa in
Hmm.
order to stay in a country. And so you have to work. And so I
Hmm.
think that what you mentioned about that mindset, it's a very different mindset
Hmm.
when you're like, well, I need this job because I'm living here. And if I want to live here, then I have to work and I have to then fall into line with what is expected of me. Maybe I don't necessarily have the same flexibilities or luxuries or what is it? Privilege, right?
Hmm.
That certain other folks have. And really I what what I struggle with sometimes is actually then seeing people who are struggling in work,
Hmm.
or it is impacting their mental health, but
Hmm.
not necessarily, right, having that luxury to be like, oh well, screw it, I'm quitting, I'm going to go start something else.
Hmm.
um uh it's access is incredible. I mean, I've also seen employers not treat employees who are on work visas
Hmm.
as well as people who are, citizens or green cards or holders or whatever, like permanent citizens, I guess, of that country. Maybe
Hmm.
they're getting paid lesser wages. Maybe they're working them like workhorses, whatever it might be. And that breaks my heart. And I
Hmm.
can only hope, again, I'm not in at the moment, maybe one day I'm in the position where I can actually influence and impact this. But if
Hmm.
anyone is listening that is in an organization in that power the idea is to treat people equally and give people access, help people to actually do the work that they really, really genuinely want to do. So I know that was a completely different tangent, but what you said, it was so important, so important to talk about, because diversity brings about innovation, and it brings about new ways of thinking. So bringing multiple cultures together is absolutely beautiful. So we want that. So anyway, but then to go kind of into your other question about talking a little bit about my name, and then some of the, yes, the like actually looking at culturally, what does work look like, and how it does that impact me at all. So it's very interesting. So obviously you can see me on video, but like other people can't necessarily me. I am blonde hair. I have green eyes. I am a woman. I am a white woman, and my name is, I think, confuses people oftentimes, actually. So I was not born in the US. I was born in Israel. My name is Chava. If you want to pronounce it the right way, then you get a little cha and you go like Chava. And it means life. It's Hebrew. My last name, as far as it's funny, I'm continuously learning a little bit more about my last name. My last name is like predates Germany, but obviously Germany, if you were looking at history and you were looking at like geography, was quite large. But it's I think if you actually go to like the area my that part of my family was actually from, and where the name was from, it's actually now part of the Czech Republic, somewhere in Prague. So, and I think that if you actually look even further back, it's essentially Bohemian is where the name comes from. So not, and if you look at the spelling, you're like, what how
Right.
And I mean, I'm often mistaken, so for example, the name Chava, it's spelled Chava. And so most people say Chava. Now Chava is actually a nickname in Spanish, and depending on the country, it's actually it's a different nickname in different Spanish speaking countries. So it's fascinating. I think that oftentimes people meet me and they don't expect me to look the way I look or sound the way I sound, because I have, I grew up in New Jersey. Like I definitely say things that like sound like New Jersey or New Yorker. On the other hand, my mom is from actually where you live, on Pacific Northwest. So and so she has a very different accent as well. Anyway, so when it comes to the identity, the name, the culture, it's funny. I often don't necessarily know where I fit in. I think I mentioned I grew up with a very multicultural family. There are also multiple races in my family. I also grew up in a very, very mixed neighborhood, with, with Black people, with Hispanic people, with Asian people, with Middle Eastern people, and with white people who, from, grown up and born and raised, and generations after generation born in like New Jersey. And so it's very interesting. I will also say that I think I've had experiences where people have looked at my name and not only not know how to say it, but also not want to try to say it correctly. I can't tell you how many times, actually, I've literally had someone say, "Oh, that's too hard." And so then they don't try. And that doesn't feel good, because you know what it does to you is it feels like someone doesn't want to try and get to know you and perhaps doesn't have the even respect
Mm-hmm.
to try
Mm-hmm.
to even say your name correctly, which is a huge part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I mean, the least that someone can do is try. The least someone can do is be curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we actually look at that, and we will look at that in work settings, and we look in that in building diversity, equity, inclusion into organizations, and
Mm-hmm.
going to a job, the littlest thing of asking someone and actually pronouncing someone's name correctly
Mm-hmm.
is so much more substantial
Mm-hmm.
than you might think. Is
Definitely.
right.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I just wanted to say that I know of a lot of people who get an American name because their names are so hard to pronounce. Even my name, sometimes people screwed up, so I say J, because like J is so much easier. You go to Starbucks and people don't know how to sort of say your name.
Yeah.
And I realized the impact of it, wherein like people, that's where I feel it starts in terms of your own sort of mental health, wherein like for sure that people won't be able to pronounce your name. And then I've had friends who've had really long names, and they don't let people pronounce their last names because they
Mhm.
know, for one, people are gonna destroy it, or people are not going to be able to pronounce it. So as soon as somebody says their first name, they say, yes, this is me, right? Because you don't want people to sort of not even try, like you said, not even make an effort. And this happens over and over again, right? I mean, like,
Oh
this
yeah,
happens.
everywhere, right?
Yeah. This happens when you need to get a stamp on your passport. This happens when you need to go to different like offices to sort of get all the documentation ready, right? I mean, like, and every time it almost invalidates who you are. It almost
Mhm.
invalidates what an individual is. And and it also shows disrespect immediately to say, hey, you know what, I can't pronounce your name. I'm not even going to try. And I'm just going to use my accent. I'm just going to use my voice the way I use it with other people, and then screw it up and not even apologize for screwing it up as well. So
Mhm.
um
I think that what you mentioned about eh, so actually to go back to like your example like with in Starbucks, or yeah, going to like submit documents or something like that, you can tell the difference in someone's demeanor when you meet them at, at a coffee shop and they ask you your name and then they say, "Could you spell that for me?" or "Could you repeat that so that I get it right?"
mhm,
Um, versus, I mean, listen, I know coffee shops, Starbucks, there's like a million people. It can be really, really busy and they're just trying to get through their day. And so I try not to be too hard on these people. But I will say, for the people who do go out of their way
mhm,
to spell it correctly, to pronounce it correctly, there's
mhm,
something about that you feel a little bit more included.
mhm,
And that's just like in your daily life, right? Like you're just going to the store, you're going to coffee shop, or you're going to the post office or whatever it might be. So like
mhm,
imagine what that's like when you're actually working with people, whether they're your clients or whether you're on a project or whether it's your coworker,
mhm,
and they make that extra effort to try. And if people
mhm,
are afraid of trying,
mhm,
that's something else. Like get out of your comfort zone, because
mhm,
building equality and building happiness and building inclusion and building belonging is not an easy thing to do.
mhm,
You're going to be uncomfortable, but like the it's how it means a lot to me when someone asks me a little bit like a follow-up question, whether it's like, how do you spell it, what does it mean, where is it from, something like that.
mhm,
um because it shows that they're curious, and they're actually like interested, they're actually interested,
mhm,
and it makes me feel honestly a little bit better. Like you're probably gonna get a smile from me. I mean, I smile
Mhm.
a lot, but like you're gonna get an extra one.
Right, for sure. Um, and the other thing in terms of the immigration and the stuff you mentioned, in terms of the layoffs, it sort of uh, damages the whole sense of identity when somebody says, "Hey, you know what? I cannot hire you because I don't know how to sort of sponsor you as
Mm,
an immigrant.
mm-hmm,
I don't know how, or I don't want to go through the expense of doing these things because it is a lot of work for me. And imagine, like, being equally qualified or even better than some of the other applicants and not being able to be considered for these roles. And the amount of damage it does to your psyche, to your your own sort of confidence, when people claim that the procedures that are there are too complicated. And what is the plight of the people who are trying to apply and who are struggling, when the government makes it so hard or so regulated that people don't want to comply to these regulations as well. Um, and as we are talking about, like, by the people and for the people, right? uh, you know um, I'm just trying to understand, like, in this sort of capitalistic economy, wherein, like, money is prioritized over everything else, like, what is sort of your advice for people trying to do something, start something that is prioritizing people, and like
mm-hmm,
how do you see that sort of impacting workplace well-being, and,
mm-hmm.
like, employee well-being, and how people can do better in terms of building something new. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So first, I want to thank you for sharing. Yeah, some of the, I mean, some of what's going on right with work visas and how difficult that is, and honestly, yeah, how that might feel to someone if you've been laid off and you're on a work visa and you have what 60 days to find a new job. I mean, you're
Mhm,
seeing people who it's taking them 6 months to find a new job, and that will carry the, and of course that right that will like carry the sponsorship too.
mhm,
um that is scary. Like your entire life can be uprooted so quickly and so easily. And so
mhm,
I do not think that we are doing people a service. I don't think that we are doing everything we can.
mhm,
Firstly, I think that, and that's probably another conversation for another time, but like, is providing certainly more time for people to find a job. 60 days is a joke. Like, honestly, like 6 months, a year, whatever it might be, and you can look at countries who are, I think actively trying to attract people to their company, sorry, not companies, countries, right, to live and work, and like the kind of, again, I don't there's a feeling of like being welcomed, right?
mhm, mhm,
But to kind of go into your other question about building for people by people, there's just like this sometimes you get this misconception that like to build a profitable business or to live in a capitalistic society
mhm,
that you can't prioritize people.
mhm,
And excuse my French, but that's bullshit.
mhm,
um I am not saying everyone should go build nonprofits, and I'm especially not saying that because women in particular are will often like go build a nonprofit, and I'm like, no, you can build a for-profit business and you can still take care of people.
mhm,
And in fact, it's actually a good thing to do. It's a financially business smart thing to do.
mhm,
Um, it's proven time and time and again that happy employees are more productive. And
mhm,
and what makes a happy employee? Well, making
mhm,
a happy employee means that not only are their basic needs met. So, and
mhm,
when I talk about basic needs, I'm talking about, okay, food and
mhm,
shelter and healthcare, right? So
mhm,
making sure those basic needs are met, but then going beyond that, beyond that. So making sure you're paying competitive wages, as competitive as you can, right? Making sure that parents can be parents and also be present at work. So if that means that a parent needs to log off at 3 p.m. because they're going to go to their kid's soccer game, then they're going to log off and go to this kid's soccer game, right? So this idea of, and there's a book actually that I read a few years ago that I absolutely love. Listen, there's one of many, many books. So there's so many books out there, but I did really like this book. Is called People Over Profit. It was by a guy named Dale Partridge. It's been quite a few years since I read this book, so I don't know where Dale is now. But it's People Over Profit. Break the system, live with purpose, be more successful. It was a book I read. I think it was published not quite 10 years ago, but I read it fairly early in my startup career. I guess I entered startups in around 2013. It came out in 2015. I actually read it fairly not that long after, like, it was published and put out there. And so it doesn't contain a lot of what I believe in. There's like 7 core beliefs. I'll be honest, I cannot remember what they are. But it's this idea that holding very strongly to your values and measuring yourself on them, you can build successful, profitable businesses within capitalism, right? That are not only good for the people internally, so making sure you are prioritizing and putting your employees first and making sure that they, like I said, beyond meeting their basic needs, you're trying to do your best to help them live very full lives. But also you can have a positive external influence. I mean, look at Patagonia. Patagonia is a fabulous brand. They do a lot for the world. Everyone I've ever met there that have worked there has enjoyed their work, like genuinely. They're also very, very active, like activists, like politically advocates, right? And they also make big decisions on who they're partnering with and who they're not partnering with. Certainly organizations of that size. So, I mean, I could name a bunch of them, right? But you know the ones, right? Have so much opportunity to like genuinely make the world a better place. And for the startups that are growing, like, you can do everything you can. For example, there are so many things that cost nothing for you to do, right? And I think a lot of the time it isn't like, we can't look at cost. Maybe you're looking at time. Maybe it takes you a little longer to do something. So if you decide that diversity is going to be a priority, and there was this really amazing video that I can share with you, actually, about someone. There was a story about a CEO, and the CEO made the decision, I want more diversity in my leadership team. And they said, and if you don't give that to me, then we're not going to hire anyone. And they literally were like, okay, well then here are these diverse candidates. And it took until a C-suiter to say, I am not hiring someone until you give me some diverse candidates that they actually got diverse candidates. And I've been trying to remember the name of the woman who was speaking. Her name was Melody Hobson, and she was telling this story, and she's the president of Ariel Investments. She is a Black woman. She is incredible, and she did this talk with several other Black women who are leaders. There was like a woman who's like the CEO of consumer banking at JP Morgan Chase. There was someone who was the executive vice president, I think, at Home Depot. Anyways, and they're talking about like the decision that you make to build diversity or to build equity or to build inclusion. It's a decision you make. Hiring people, it might take you longer because you need to now be curious and you need to look outside of maybe your networks, like where you might typically recruit from, but
Mm-hmm.
you can do it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, again, Beyonce or Alicia Keys, obviously huge superstars, but they have proven that if you want diversity in your orchestra, for example, you can find it. It is possible. These people exist.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it might be that you need to be a little bit more curious. You need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that said, you
Mm-hmm.
can, as a growing business, you can make the decision. You can make decisions that, don't cost a lot of money to do, letting
Mm-hmm.
someone leave work at 3 p.m. because they want to go to their kid's soccer game, or making the decision that you want to build diversity within your organization. Again, it may take a little bit more time,
Mm-hmm.
but you can make the decision and you can actually do it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so and that's truly what I believe in, what I think is possible. And again, I don't have to I think run off a bunch of numbers or like data points, because you can literally just go on Google and say like, why are companies with happy employees more productive or more successful? Why are more diverse organizations? Where's the data behind the fact that more diverse organizations are actually financially more successful than those
Mm-hmm.
who are not? Like, all of that data exists, and like, I don't know how need to spew it off. It's literally the quickest Google search.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I
Def-
feel like I was like, sorry, I think I went on a little bit of a rant, but like, it it is all possible to do,
mm-hmm.
and you can also be profitable. And I am all for putting more money
Mm-hmm.
in, when we talk about gender inequity, right? So I'm all for putting more money in women's pockets. I'm for putting more money into people of color's pockets. Like,
Mm-hmm.
when we and this is the last thing I'll say about it, is when we do that, when we actually make it more accessible, when people who historically have not had the same wealth, right, that others
Mm-hmm.
have that have had. And we're going to talk about primarily like white men, right, versus
Mm-hmm.
women, or versus people of color, or here let's or people of color who are also women, right? Then they put that money back into the economy because they have more buying power. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is the sort of thing you look at. This is a good thing for society overall. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the
Mm-hmm.
last thing I'll say about it. I am very passionate when I'm talking about these things.
Definitely. I mean, like, I think a few things people can sort of take away is like, look at the for-profit corporations, and not naming names. Patagonia is one of them, and looking at how they are going about making decisions, making diversity, equity, and inclusion an important part of your hiring process. Having more people in the C-suites from a more diverse background, than just white men, uh, and understanding that people being happier is in the best interest of your company as well. So they're going to be more productive, and they're going to deliver better results for you than otherwise. So you know the conversation has been great. I'm just trying to be more inclusive, in terms of like asking people, what do they do, when they're feeling stressed out, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling overwhelmed. What would be your advice? Like, what do you do when you are in those situations, as well? So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like I have this laundry list of things. I call it my toolbox.
Hmm.
And it's actually something I would recommend to anyone who's trying to figure this out.
Hmm.
And um I did work with a therapist on this idea, so it's not wholly my idea, but
Hmm.
I also like lists, and I also like this idea of not having, if you, let's say that you're having a really rough day
Hmm.
and you're like, I need to do something for myself, but I don't know what.
Mhm.
make a list of
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
that bring you light.
Mhm.
And they should vary in terms of in terms of like effort, right?
Mhm.
So uh and I mean, I went an extra step and I actually ranked them and like on a 1 to 5 scale of like how much effort something takes, right?
Mhm.
So one thing for me would be stop and do deep breathing exercises. So
Mhm.
I do use Headspace still because but there are so many apps out there. You also don't need any money for this. You can also do it literally anywhere, right? Is
Mhm.
to actually do deep breathing where you breathe in for, let's say, 4 or 5 seconds. You then hold that breath for another 4 or 5 seconds, and then you have a longer exhale after that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So if you were breathing in and holding for 4 or 5 seconds, then maybe have your out breath be like 6 or 7 seconds.
Mhm.
And you can literally count and do this like 5 or 6 times.
Mhm.
And it literally helps your body to like let go of
Mhm.
stress. And
Mhm.
so something like that on my list is like a 1, like that's the lowest possible effort, right?
Mhm.
Then like other things that I might do that maybe take a little bit more effort that would be like on like maybe a 2 or a 3 or something would be like going. So I find movement is
Mhm.
very important for me.
Mhm.
I mean, there's all the science behind how important movement is actually for mental health, but I absolutely love movement. I think finding movement that you like, just
Mhm.
because someone loves running or
Mhm.
loves cycling or whatever, like doesn't mean you have to go do it. Just find some movement that you actually like. So I
Mhm.
absolutely love yoga, and I also really love weightlifting, and I really love biking.
Mhm.
So depending on where I am,
Mhm.
when,
Mhm.
obviously those will have different accessibility levels and effort levels.
Mhm.
But that might be something in the mid. And
Mhm.
then if I am realizing that, you know, um, like I need something more, like I need some like substantial rest or rest of sorts. That
Mhm.
could be booking a massage, it could be going on a trip, it could be going to visit family or friends
Mhm.
in another state or whatever it is. So I have this toolbox. Oh heck, and here's another one. You like cookies?
Mhm.
I
Yep, I
love
do.
me. Right, okay. So I love an iced matcha latte
Right.
and a chocolate chip cookie.
Right.
So anyways, all those sorts of things are in my toolbox for when for that, and they all contribute to that, and they all have varying levels, and I literally have a list somewhere
Mhm.
in case I just don't cannot in the moment think of something. You can go to your list and be like, okay, I'm gonna go do that
Definitely.
because you know.
Definitely. I mean, like, there is so much preparation people do for, like, emergency, like, what's there in your toolbox, like, for emergency preparedness, or like, if you're going hiking or backpacking, what's there in your backpack. So, like,
Mhm.
it's good to sort of look at your own sort of mental health from that standpoint as well, like having a toolbox for yourself too. So,
Yeah, it's like your preparedness or like your survival kit or like, okay, I live in the world where we have earthquakes. So it's like people have these like, yeah, those go bags or whatever.
right.
So
Exactly.
this is just, I mean, it's not your go bag, but it's your preparedness bag. You're prepared to take care of yourself.
Yeah. And this is one thing that I wish I had brought it up earlier, and this is sort of missed my mind. June is sort of Pride Month, and I want, since you brought up inclusion so many times, I just want to get your take on, like, how we can sort of be more inclusive from that standpoint, and what does that new sort of way of work look like, in terms of being more inclusive from that standpoint as well. So,
Yeah, inclusion is so important at, in so many well, I mean so many in all areas of our lives.
hmm
Um there are things that we can each do individually that are not performative. They're actually taking action
hmm
to help make the world. society, our lives, our friendship groups, all of these things, right? A more inclusive place. And that does
Mhm.
have a huge impact on people's mental health. I mean, we just talked about, like names, like
Mhm.
what just making the effort to literally learn someone's name, right? And how they say it. So, inclusion and being a better supporter, it has to do with allyship.
Mhm.
And allyship should be very inclusive.
Mhm.
When I think about that, um, you are not making a decision that you're supporting like one part of a community. And so we're talking about, it's Pride Month, right? So we're not just talking about you're supporting one part of the community. Like, okay, great, I support gay people. Well,
Mhm.
there are many letters there. There's
Mhm.
LGBTQ
Mhm.
IA plus, right?
Mhm.
Um, so that also means that if you're going to be an ally to the community, that
Mhm.
means you're also supporting and being an ally to the trans community, or
Mhm.
you're also being an ally to the Black or Hispanic trans community or LGBTQ IA plus communities, right? Um, it's being inclusive and wanting genuinely equal human rights for everyone.
Mhm. Mhm.
So a small step that someone can take is to, well, first of all, self-awareness. So, and that's not a small step, actually. That's a pretty substantial step that can take a long time. In fact, you're always continuously building self-awareness, but like looking at maybe the language that you use or you promote
Mhm.
in the workplace.
Mhm.
Pronouns are actually really important, kind of like
Mhm.
your name. Like getting someone's pronoun correctly is a
Mhm.
small thing that you can do.
Mhm.
um Being curious, so
Mhm.
wanting to learn more.
Mhm.
So when you learn more and you have more experiences, then you have broadened your understanding of what are other people's unique experiences, right?
Mhm.
So whether that's like following different people, I mean, like different from yourself, following different people who, whether that's actors or creators or artists, like on
Mhm.
social media, or like watching movies or
Mhm.
reading books, like those are all ways that, one, you're also supporting their business, right?
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
but you're also learning about them. And I guess the last thing it would be is you can support local businesses. Local businesses literally are what keeps our economy, our culture alive.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so support a local business.
Mhm.
That's a really easy, quick thing to do, and it makes a
Mhm.
huge difference.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean the conversation has been great, and I'm sure a lot of people would have gotten a lot of pointers from building a equitable workforce to the point where how do we be more inclusive, and talking a little bit about immigration and immigrants as well. I just asked people this question, like, if there were a few things you wanted people to take away from this conversation, what would they be? So.
Oh gosh. Yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. I have really enjoyed like just all of the questions you've asked as well, and you kind of helping me reflect myself. So like choosing, gosh, I have to just choose a couple of things to take away from this. Um so firstly, I can't stress this enough, and I feel like I'm constantly reminding myself of this. And since this is a mental health podcast, it's you have to be gentle on yourself.
Mhm.
Um every day we wake up and we have like a different level, our energy levels are different,
Mhm.
where we are emotionally can be different, it can
Mhm.
change throughout the day.
Mhm.
And just knowing that and being like, I'm going to do the best that I possibly can for
Mhm.
this day,
Mhm.
uh and be okay with that, even if that means, and I remember having a couple conversations with some friends and some colleagues of like, even if that means that all you can do today is like stay in bed, read a book, or make sure that you get 3 meals in the day, or you go for a quick walk of sorts, like whatever it means. Like just realize, like, just be gentle on yourself and realize that this is going to vary every day. I think that would be a huge takeaway. Then I think we did talk about so many different things, and when we do think about mental health, it actually can get very, very complex in terms of the societal impact, and
Hmm.
and how does that impact you personally, and how does it impact your family and your relationships and work, and all of those different things. This is a learning process, and so
Hmm.
um take things step by step.
Hmm.
But the biggest thing that I would say is be open and curious to
Hmm.
learning more about yourself,
Hmm.
but also those around you, and like have these conversations, ask questions about, like, hey, how do you take care of yourself,
Hmm.
if you're kind of trying to figure that out. So um, I think that those are two really big takeaways. I think that people will take away from the other parts of the conversation in terms of the culture, in terms of the work or society or
Hmm.
anything. Like, they'll take away what they can in
Hmm.
and where they are in their own journey. But I think those other two things that I just mentioned,
Definitely, definitely.
those would be good for me. Yeah.
I, I think, sometimes you get overwhelmed, and that's one of the reasons why I do this as well. Because there's a lot of information for people to take in. So, but yeah, thanks again for your time. And yeah,
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for providing space and to have these sorts of conversations. It's really important. So I'm really glad that yeah, I'm really glad to have been a part of this, and I'm really glad that you're having these thoughtful conversations too. So thank you.
all right.